They told me to hold the farmhouse. Nothing more. Just keep watch, keep notes, wait until the unit returned. The others moved on, boots fading down the road, and the house was mine alone. At first it felt like shelter. 4 walls. A roof. A fire that could be coaxed from the old stone hearth. But the longer I stayed, the less it felt empty. The floorboards creaked like footsteps in rooms no one entered. The doors shifted with drafts that moved too deliberately. The air smelled of bread baked years ago, of smoke long gone cold. It wasn't the enemy I was guarding against. It was the house itself. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. If you enjoy these reflective war stories, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you. It's always grounding to see this quiet community spread out across the world, finding rest together. Now dim the lights. Let the quiet settle around you. Tonight's story isn't about battles or movement. It's about a house left behind by war, and the soldier left inside it. This is The Empty House. They left me with the house at dusk. The company moved on toward the ridge, boots heavy on the frozen road, rifles slung, gear clattering faint. I stood in the doorway as they passed, one hand on the logbook, the other on the strap of my rifle. 2 days, Mercer. Hold it. Watch the road. We'll be back. That was the order. Nothing more. 2 days. The farmhouse leaned against the hillside like an old man who'd given up on standing straight. Stone walls chipped and cracked. Roof half-sagged under years of weather. Windows broken, patched with wood where glass had once been. It smelled of smoke long gone, of earth pressed too long under boots. But it was still a house. And that meant shelter. Better than mud. Better than snow. Better than sky. I walked the room slow, rifle ready though there was no one left to meet. Dust lay thick across the floorboards. Shadows stretched long from the sinking sun. Every sound, every shift of timber, every scuff of my boot, seemed louder than it should. Upstairs, a narrow room held 2 iron bedsteads, frames bent, springs rusted. In the corner, a small dresser still clung to scraps of cloth. A child's shoe, cracked leather, lay forgotten beside it. I looked at it too long. Then turned away. Back downstairs, I set my post in the main room. A chair near the hearth. Logbook open on the table. Rifle across my knees. From the doorway, I could see the road that wound past the house. Beyond that, fields pale with frost, lined by olive trees stripped bare for winter. I wrote the first line. 1,700 hours, position taken. Road visible. House secure. The pencil scratched faint. The words looked small against the page. But they were mine. And they meant I was still here. The wind pressed against the shutters, loose wood clattering like someone testing the latch. I turned, rifle lifting. Nothing there. Only draft. Only air. But it didn't feel empty. Not yet. The first night made itself known in small ways. The way the shadows lengthened until they had no edges. The way the wind pressed against the shutters as if it wanted inside. The way the silence grew so thick it seemed to have weight. I sat by the hearth with the logbook open, pencil ready, but there was little to record. 1,800 hours, road empty. Wind steady. House holds. The words steadied me. The room did not. The walls spoke first. Not words, not truly. Just the small complaints of old stone and older timber. A shift in the frame. A groan where roof met beam. But in the quiet, each sound felt deliberate. Like the house was reminding me, I was here before you. I will be here after you. The smell of the place thickened after dark. Damp earth. Dust. And something warmer, sweeter, just at the edge. Like bread. Not fresh. Not real. But memory made sharp enough to taste. I wrote it down, though it wasn't an order. 1830, strange scent present. Possible bread. Source unclear. The pencil hesitated before the last two words. Because I already knew the source. The house. The floorboards carried sound even when I did not move. A creak in the hall. A shift at the top of the stair. Footsteps too light to be mine. I pressed my back tighter to the chair, rifle heavy across my lap. Nothing moved in the doorway. But the air carried weight, as if someone had paused there to look in. I whispered into the scarf at my throat. Still here. The words cracked, low, just enough to remind me I hadn't vanished into the dust. The house creaked back in answer. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. By midnight the wind had its own rhythm. It slipped through cracks in the shutters, shifting them open and shut. Each movement sounded like a hand at the latch. Each slam like a door closing upstairs. I wrote again. 0000, draft activity significant. No enemy present. House unsettled. House unsettled. Two words that belong to me, not to any report. But I let them stay. At some point, I rose to check the road. Frost shone faint under the moon, white lines stretching through olive trees. Still empty. Still silent. But when I turned back to the room, the smell was there again. Bread. Warm. Impossible. I breathed slow, steady, refusing it. Then sat back down at the table. The logbook waited. And I wrote one more line before letting my eyes rest. 0100, still present. Still holding. The words bent crooked in the candlelight. But they stayed. And the house stayed with them. By the third hour, the house learned my measure. It began returning me to myself in pieces. A creak for my breath. A shift for my heartbeat. A soft door click from a room I hadn't opened for the thought I hadn't meant to think. I stopped calling the sounds noise. Noise is careless. These weren't. I walked the rooms with the rifle low, slow, the way the sergeant taught, heel, toe, pause, listen, decide, don't rush your own shadow. The hall smelled of old ash and damp stone. The door frames were polished where hands had once lived, the kind of shine wood gets from years of being useful. The first room on the right had a window patched with rough boards. Through the seams, a thin run of light, dust turning in it as if auditioning to be snow. A crib sat under that light, empty, one spindle missing, a blanket folded in the corner like a rule kept even after the rule stopped mattering. The blanket had learned the shape of a small body and decided to remember it. The floor spoke when I crossed it. Two boards conversed under my left boot, their talk ended when I lifted. I wrote in the book, balanced on the sill. 0215 hours, interior creaks consistent with age/settle. No human presence. Then I added, small, against orders, memory present. The next room held a long table and 4 chairs. One chair was turned out, as if the person had meant to return but never did. A blue plate sat at that place with a hairline crack running from rim to center, repaired with wire, care taken at some point when things were fixed instead of replaced. In the hearth, gray ash hid the shape of a burned log. I stirred it with the rifle tip. Heat did not answer, but a smell did, old smoke, a mood more than a scent, the ghost of dinners. A fly lay on the mantel, winter-stilled, delicate as a punctuation mark. The house used the wind well. A draft moved down the stair and nuzzled the door to the pantry. The latch clicked, not open, just enough to say here I am. 0240, draft through stairwell. Pantry latch moving with wind. House responsive. Responsive. The word made the room feel less empty and more awake. Upstairs, the landing gave me a new map. To the left, a narrow room with 2 iron beds, as I'd seen. To the right, a space with a chest whose lid had warped and would not close. When I tried the chest, the lid groaned the kind of groan a tired man makes when asked to do one more thing. Inside, a coat, patched at both elbows, a bundle of letters tied with thread, a scrap of ribbon, sun faded to the color of modest skies. I did not read the letters. I held them in my hand long enough to feel that paper keeps warmth longer than wood. Then I put them back. War teaches you what not to take. The floor here kept a diary in scratches. Short marks near the beds where someone had dragged a trunk. A long arc by the window where a chair had been turned back and forth to face the field and then the door and then the field again. I let my boot trace the arc without stepping on it. Respect, mostly for myself. 0305, upper rooms intact. Personal effects present. No enemy sign. I wanted to add lives intact and didn't. The door at the end of the hall stuck. Its paint had chipped away in a pattern that looked like a map I didn't know. When I leaned, it let go with the soft surrender of tired hinges. The room beyond was small, 2 steps wide, a prayer glued to the wall, corners curled, words in a hand finer than mine. The window here held its glass. Frost had made a fern garden there, each curve perfect, a whole forest painted in ice. Behind the glass, the world pretended to be far away. I set the rifle against the frame and put my forehead to the cold pane. It cleared a circle and I saw the line of the road, pale, obedient to the lay of the land, empty. 0330, road still clear. Visibility fair. Interior secure. When I turned back, the empty room had a sound in it, the aftersound of someone leaving, the kind of hush a door leaves behind. I stood until it passed. The house seemed grateful I had noticed. Back downstairs, the main room had shifted its weight. Houses do that, settle to match the person in them. The chair by the hearth remembered me. When I sat, the legs spoke the same word they had said earlier, and I knew it now as you again. I fed the candle with a cautious trim, its flame a small planet with rules it did not share. The light found new corners, woke a tin cup on the shelf, brought out a shine in the tabletop where sleeves had polished it with the work of eating. I wrote. 0400, house quiet. Rhythm learned. Road unchanged. Still present. The pencil left the period a touch too deep. A tiny crater of graphite. I pressed my thumb over it until it smoothed. The echoes started then, not sounds repeating, but arrangements. The pantry door's click paired itself with a wall crack so that they spoke in turns. The stair gave a single note whenever the wind leaned from the west. The shutter in the back room chose to answer the front one with a judder half a breath later, making a heartbeat between them. I mapped it without moving. Front shutter, SHU. Back shutter, HH. Stair, NN. Pantry, K. A word came out of it if you were unkind to yourself. I was gentle and let it stay a pattern. 0430, pattern drafts / board responses. No external trigger. Maintain. Maintain is honest work. It occupies the hands the way a hammer used to occupy men like me. There was a basin in the corner with a crack like lightning and a hair in the crack, trapped years ago, would not come out, would live there longer than any of us. I filled it with snow and waited for it to decide to be water again. Waiting is a kind of job, the house approved of those. When the melt came, the water carried dust from the rim and made a small galaxy. I drank the careful top and left the bottom for the floor to think about. The floor, polite, soaked it without boasting. 0505, water obtained. Condition steady. The candle faltered, then grew brave again. Its courage was contagious. Around dawn. The kind of dawn that doesn't bring a new color so much as erases a layer of black, the house gave me its longest story, a sequence of steps across the upstairs corridor, measured, not mine. I marked my breath. Not mine. I watched the stair mouth. Nothing appeared. The steps, 3, then a pause, then 2, repeated the way an old habit repeats. I didn't chase them. I let the house keep that one. 0535, footstep-like sequence upstairs. No visual. Likely thermal shift/settle. Likely. That word is a bridge you can walk without falling. The road offered nothing. The field stayed dressed in a thin white shirt. Olive trees stood like elders who knew better than to argue. I added a final line for the hour. 0600, households. Road empty. Echoes present. Mercer present. My name again. A small ceremony with no audience. I closed the book for a while and laid my hand flat on the table. The wood was warm from the candle, warm from me. The house seemed to watch this and file it away under facts. Somewhere a door in memory shut softly. Somewhere else, the scent of bread, unreasonable and kind, arrived and departed, as if the house had decided I had earned the right to be lied to gently. I let the lie rest in the room. I rested with it. And the house, satisfied, settled another fraction of an inch into its hill, the way old things do when they agree with the weather and the man inside them. By the fourth watch, the house had grown confident. It no longer whispered by accident. It remembered out loud. Dust became its first language. Each shelf wore a pale skin of it, disturbed only where my hand had brushed. But when the wind pressed, the dust lifted and swirled in patterns too deliberate to be aimless. A shape of a plate once set down. The outline of a hand once leaning. The faint ghost of a chair pulled back from the table. The house wasn't collecting dust. It was collecting memory. And it offered them back to me one by one. The smell followed next. Smoke from the hearth that had burned itself out years ago. Bread that no longer existed. Soap, faint, drifting up from the stairwell. It came not as scent, but as suggestion. A memory sharper than air should allow. I breathed it in slow. And for a moment, I wasn't Mercer the soldier. I was Daniel the guest. A man who had walked into another man's life and sat in his chair. I wrote. 0700, odors present. Smoke, bread, soap. Source internal. Source internal. A phrase meant for officers. But I knew better. The source was the house. Objects joined the conversation. The tin cup on the shelf shifted under no hand. Not far. Not loud. Just enough to remind me it had once been lifted. The pantry door swayed wide for a heartbeat, showing shelves bare but shaped with the memory of jars. Then it closed again, latch clicking polite. Upstairs, a drawer slid an inch open, revealing folded cloth long gone stiff with time. Not haunting. Just remembering. I set my hand on the logbook, steady. And the pencil obeyed. 0730, objects moved. Minimal. No cause found. House alive with memory. The word alive nearly tore the page. But I left it. Because denying it felt worse. The air thickened by mid-morning. Not heavy. Not damp. Just filled with the weight of things unsaid. As if the house wanted me to know what it had seen, what it had lost, but could only offer fragments. Creak. Smell. Shift. Dust. Enough to suggest lives still lingering, but never whole. I whispered into the scarf, voice faint. Still here. The chair beneath me creaked in answer. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. The road outside gave nothing. Empty. Silent. Unchanged. But the house offered more than the world beyond. It remembered. And I was its witness. By the time I closed the logbook for the hour, I no longer felt alone. Not comforted. Not safe. But not alone. And the house seemed to know. By the 5th hour, silence had stopped being background. It had become weight. It pressed down from the rafters, settled into the floorboards, filled the gaps between breaths. Every corner of the house carried it, thick as smoke, heavy as stone. I had thought silence was nothing. I was wrong. Silence is a presence. And this one meant to crush me. The first sign was in my chest. Each breath slowed, dragged, as if I were pulling air through cloth. The scarf grew stiff with frost, my own words frozen there, unread. When I whispered still here, the silence swallowed it before it reached the air. I didn't even hear myself. The logbook pages resisted too. The pencil scratched dull, lead breaking more than writing. The words sank small into the paper, barely visible. 0800, road empty. House unchanged. Silence heavy. Silence heavy. 3 words that belonged to no manual. But they were the truth. My body began to echo the house. Joints stiffened like warped doors. Hands cramped like shutters swollen in rain. Even the beat of my heart felt slower, heavier, a thud in rhythm with the house's groans. I shifted in the chair, and the silence pressed harder in response, reminding me, be still. Be quiet. Be mine. The upstairs gave me phantom weight. Steps I did not make pressed across the hall. Measured. Careful. Deliberate. Each one fell into my chest like a hammer, though the boards above carried no one. I did not rise to check. The silence had already told me what I would find. Nothing. And that nothing was heavier than any presence. I wrote again, though my hand shook. 0830, steps above. No visual. Pressure increasing. Still present. Still present. But only barely. The fireless hearth seemed to lean closer, stones dark with age, mouth wide but offering nothing. Its silence roared louder than any blaze. The walls too leaned in, groaning, bending, timber pressing low. Not to collapse. To crowd. The silence didn't want me gone. It wanted me smaller. Folded. Reduced. Until I fit the space it allowed. I pressed the logbook to my chest, as if paper could hold weight back. The silence shifted then, easing a fraction, as if appeased. I realized, the book was proof I hadn't been erased. And proof, the silence tolerated. When the candle guttered, I thought it would fail. But the silence held it steady, as though it wanted its witness to stay awake, keep watching, keep writing. Not mercy. Demand. By the time the hour passed, I no longer thought of silence as lack. It was a force, deliberate, patient, endless. And the house was full of it. And I was inside it. By the 6th watch, the shadows had learned the floor plan better than I had. They moved first. I only followed. They did not jump or frighten, that would have been a mercy. They settled. In the corners where the ceiling met the wall, in the wedge of stair that never saw a candle, in the seam beneath the pantry door. They chose their places the way people choose chairs at a table, by habit, not by rule. The morning's gray had climbed enough to loosen the windows from pure black. Light took the shape of boards before it took the shape of glass. What brightness there was said less about the sun and more about dust being willing to admit it existed. I wrote in the book. 0900 hours, light low. Shadows persistent. House unchanged externally. Then, a line I had no right to write, shadows consistent internally. Because they were. They arrived and remained like guests with a right to stay. The back room kept the longest one. It began at the hearth and extended across the floor toward the table leg, thinning until it was hair. I measured it without rising, knob of the chair to crack in plank 3, then checked again when the wind pressed the shutter. The wind moved, the shadow did not. 0918, hearth shadow constant under draft. Underlined, because it felt like a fact the house wanted me to notice. Upstairs, I stood in the hall and waited for stairs that no one climbed. The baluster cast a thin ladder down the wall, each rung steady. The door at the end leaked its own dark, a tidy rectangle laid on the floorboards like a rug. I timed the pause. 3 murmurs from the boards, the softest sigh of trapped air, then nothing. A rhythm that belonged to no living step but wore that shape out of memory. I did not open the door. The house had taught me restraint, and I meant to keep the lesson. 0940, persisting step pattern. Shadow on threshold unchanged. No ingress. No ingress, because I knew better than to invite. Back downstairs, I sat and let the table draw my eye. Tables are honest. They tell you if a room means to keep company or not. This one had scars measured in meals. Knife marks where bread had resisted, a ring where a hot pot had taught the wood patience, the shine in front of the end chair where hands had rested while ideas cooled. A thin shadow, no wider than a ribbon, lay across those marks from the cupboard's edge. I slid the candle left. The flame made its small argument. The shadow ignored it. 0955, cupboard cast remains constant relative to daylight, independent of candle. It felt like writing weather. The pantry had a deeper pool, as if stone had decided to keep night there even at noon. When the door breathed, the pool stayed. I watched until my eyes found a figure in it. Not a person. A posture. The idea that someone had once stood there too long and left behind the shape of waiting. I stood in the doorway and matched that posture. The board beneath my boot answered with a sound I had not yet heard in the house, agreement. I left the posture in place and backed out, slow. 1015, persistent dark at pantry threshold, subjective impression, lingering stance. It was the first time I had written subjective and felt lighter for it. The road outside remained an answer without a question. I noted it anyway. 10:30, road remains empty. Silence maintained externally. Internally, the house was noiseless in a way that was not quiet. The kind of noiseless that accumulates like snow. I poured a little of the melted water into the cup, the tin colder than the liquid. The cup's shadow made an ellipse that bisected the ring left by the last person to drink here. My ellipse fit theirs by accident and then, by not moving, by choice. You learn to sit inside other people's geometry in a war. It makes you smaller and more careful and somehow more present. The smell of bread returned, thinner now, stretched like a memory retold once too often. It didn't bring hunger with it this time. It brought a picture of hands flour-dusted and quick, and the careless joy of a door opened with a foot when both hands were working. I set the cup down where a hand might reach it. The shadow of the cup leaned to meet the shadow of the hand I imagined. They made a clean line together. 1100, sensory echo, bread, diminished. House memory active. Mercer present. My name again, against disappearance. Around midday, a beam in the ceiling made a sound like a bow drawn across a single string. It began soft, grew, and then relaxed itself back into wood. As it did, the shadow on the hearth deepened to the color of a bruise and stayed there as if convinced. I told myself to move, to prove I wasn't part of the furniture. I rose, crossed to the window, and cracked the shutter a finger's width. Light laid a new stripe across the floor, bright and indifferent. The old stripe from the cupboard remained beside it, unchanged, as if the room had decided which measure belonged to it and which did not. 1130, external light introduced, persistent interior lines maintained stability. The house kept its own map, no matter what I asked the sun to do. A low hour came then. The kind of hour that sits on the edge of the bed and won't say what it wants. I let it be, and it let me stay. The logbook grew heavy in my hands, damp spine fat with the night it had eaten. I opened to a blank and found it almost cruel. Blank asks for proof. I gave it what I had. 1200, households. Shadows stable. Silence steady. Watch maintained. For SS, lined like fence posts. I ran a finger down the line of them and felt steadier too. The upstairs returned its steps, 3, pause, 2. I answered by not answering. The pantry kept its dark, a patient rectangle the size of someone who never came back. I answered by standing in the doorway until my breathing matched the heartbeat of the house. The hearth shadow didn't inch. I answered by believing in the truth of still things. Outside, a bird tried the roof and decided against it. Its shadow came and went honestly. As afternoon leaned toward what passes for evening in winter, I understood what the house had been asking all along. Not who are you to be here? But can you hold still enough to belong without owning? I put the candle out with a pinch and let the room accept its own light. The shadows stayed where they had chosen to stay. I took my chair without testing it. I set the book open where my hand could reach it without looking. The floor gave one contented breath. The shutters kept their counsel. The table remembered quietly. And for the first time since I took the post, the house and I sat together without argument. 1245, contention absent. Coexistence achieved. Still present. The page held the words as if they had always been there waiting to be written. I closed the book and rested my palm on its cover. The shadow of my hand joined the others on the table. It stayed a long time after I lifted it, or seemed to. By the 7th watch, the house stopped hinting. It spoke. Not in words the way men use them, but in sounds fitted together too neatly to be accident. It began with the stare. One groan low, one creak sharp, followed by silence long enough to mean a pause. Then another groan, another creak. The rhythm of steps. Not mine. Not new. Remembered. I froze, pencil poised above the page, heart steady only because the silence had already taught it how. The sound repeated. Not upstairs this time, but at the edge of the hall, just beyond the pantry door. The exact same rhythm. 2 places at once. I wrote. 1300, step pattern replicating. Multiple locations. Not visual. The pencil trembled so hard the lead tore a groove in the paper. The cupboard answered next. Not with wood this time, but with glass. A faint clink, as if a cup had been lifted, set down again. Polite. Small. The kind of sound you only hear when a room is quiet enough to welcome it. Then another clink. And another. 3 in a row. I turned my head slow, breath tight. The shelf was bare. But the sound went on. The hearth joined in. Ash shifted with no draft. A low sigh drifted out, like the end of a long breath. Not fire. Not wind. The memory of someone who had sat where I sat, waiting for bread to rise, for soup to boil, for a day to end. The sound lingered, warm in shape though the stone was cold. I whispered into my scarf, soft as the ash. Still here. The pantry door clicked in answer. Sharp. Exact. Not yes. Not no. But understood. By mid-afternoon, the house was speaking in chorus. The stair groaned in steps. The pantry clicked in time. The cupboard offered its cups. The hearth exhaled low. Each sound followed the other, careful, deliberate, unmistakable. Together they made a rhythm. A language. The house was not only remembering. It was addressing me. The logbook lay open, waiting. I forced the pencil down. 1330, house producing deliberate sequence. Not random. Communication suspected. Suspected. A safer word than believed. But I knew better. The house was speaking. The first voice rose from the stairwell. Not a creak this time. Not a groan. A voice. Low, hushed, almost hidden under the breath of the wind. It said nothing I could write. Just a shape of sound too close to speech to ignore. A syllable caught halfway between wood and throat. I held still, pencil lifted. But the stair spoke again. This time, it sounded like laughter. Not the laughter of soldiers. Not sharp, not tired. The laughter of a child. High, quick, short-lived. A laugh that had been held by the house too long and finally let go. I pressed my hand against the logbook, unsure whether to write it. The page seemed to wait, wanting the record. So I gave it words. 1400, vocalization present. Tone resembles child's laughter. No source found. My throat ached as I finished the line. Because I believed it. The pantry followed. A soft knock. Then another. Then 3 in a row, quick as hands that had once begged to be let in. I whispered without meaning to. There's no one here. But the knocks came again, sharper this time. The house was not asking. It was insisting. Upstairs, a door closed with care. Not slammed. Not broken. But eased into its frame the way someone does when they mean not to wake another. Then footsteps, measured, deliberate, walking the hall. 3, pause, 2. The same rhythm as before. But this time heavier. Closer. I gripped the rifle tight. Not to fire. To keep my hands from shaking. The logbook pages blurred, but I forced the words. 1430, footsteps repeated. Distinct weight. Location upstairs. Still present. The words crooked, lines wavering. But the page held them. And the house allowed me to finish. The cupboard spoke again, louder. Not just clinks this time. A full clatter, as if dishes had been set for a meal no one would eat. The sound filled the room. Sharp. Bright. I could almost see them, plates laid out, cups filled, bread steaming at the center of the table. Voices low with talk. A family gathering where war had not yet come. The smell of bread returned, sharper, almost warm. I nearly reached for it. Instead, I wrote. 1500, table activity auditory. Smell of bread increased. No visual. The word smell shook more than the rest. Because it was truer than I wanted it to be. The hearth sighed again. Longer this time. Then a sound that was not sigh at all. A sob. Quiet. Stifled. A woman's sob, pressed into the stones by time. Released now, in the hour it chose. I swallowed hard, throat burning. I had no answer for it. No comfort to give. So I only wrote. 1530, weeping sound present. Source, hearth. House active. House active. 2 words I should never have admitted. But the page needed them. And the house had earned them. By evening, the house was no longer subtle. It wasn't remembering for itself anymore. It was speaking for me. The chair across the table groaned and shifted. Slow. Careful. As if someone had sat down. I stared at the empty wood, my breath caught in the scarf. The cupboard answered, a faint clink, cup to plate. The hearth sighed warm though no fire burned. The pantry door clicked, like someone slipping quietly into the room. And then I heard it. My own voice. Still here. Whispered back from the walls, soft, exact, mine but not mine. The house had been listening. And now it was repeating. My throat tightened. The urge to answer was stronger than any order, stronger than any fear. To say yes. To tell it I was here, that I would sit at its table, take its bread, share its silence. The house wanted me to belong. It wanted me to stay. And for a moment, I nearly did. I stood, chair legs scraping loud. The rifle slid heavy from my lap. Boots pressed against floorboards that groaned like welcome. The room leaned closer. The house seemed to breathe with me, each sound paired to mine, each shadow mirroring. My lips parted. The words rose. But then the logbook slipped from the table. It hit the floor hard, pages spilling, open to the line I had written hours before. Still present. I dropped to my knees, grabbed the book, clutched it to my chest like a shield. The pages were damp, edges torn, ink smudged. But the words stayed. Proof I had been here. Proof I had not vanished into the house. I pressed pencil down with shaking hand. 1600, voices repeating. House demanding. Still present. Still present. The words carved into the page so deep the lead snapped. But they were mine. Not the house's. Mine. The voices dimmed after that. Not gone. Never gone. Just quieter. As if disappointed. As if waiting for another chance. The shadows retreated into corners. The hearth gave one last sigh. The cupboard stilled. But I knew they weren't finished. The house was patient. It would wait. I sat again, back to the chair, book against my chest, scarf stiff with frozen breath. And whispered into the silence, voice breaking. Still here. The walls creaked back, low, approving. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. And the house listened on. Dawn crept in without color. No gold. No warmth. Just a pale wash across the shutters, enough to turn black into gray. I waited for the sound I had been promised. Boots in the road. A voice calling my name. The scrape of gear, the clatter of return. Relief. But none came. The house woke with the light. The chair beside me creaked low, settling as though someone had only just risen. The stair groaned once, then fell silent. The hearth exhaled a final cold breath. Not loud. Not urgent. Just enough to remind me it was still there. Still listening. I opened the logbook with stiff hands. The pages warped, edges curled with damp. I forced the pencil down. 0700, light increasing. Road empty. Relief absent. The words bent crooked. Barely legible. But they stayed. Proof I stayed. Snow outside softened the road until it looked less like a path and more like a line forgotten by the earth. The olive trees leaned without care. The fields lay flat, waiting. No boots. No voices. No return. Inside, the house shifted slow, deliberate. Timbers tightening. Shutters tapping faint. A sound upstairs, like a drawer easing shut. As if it had decided, he is ours now. I pressed the logbook to my chest, spine rough against my ribs. The words inside were mine. Not the house's. Not yet. I whispered into the scarf, weak but steady. Still here. The walls creaked low in answer. Not yes. Not no. Just acknowledgement. Hours stretched. Light climbed, then faltered. The road stayed empty. The house stayed full. I wrote until the pencil dulled flat. 0900, households. Road unchanged. Relief absent. Still present. 1000, no movement. Silence steady. House listening. Still present. The last line pressed deep enough to tear the paper. Still present. But only because the book held me. When the candle guttered to nothing, the house sighed, satisfied. The chair no longer creaked. The cupboard no longer clinked. The hearth no longer breathed. It didn't need to. I had given it enough. And I understood then. Relief was never coming. The house had been my company. My command. My captor. And when someone else found it, tomorrow, next week, or never, it would remember me too. Just as it had remembered the laughter, the weeping, the bread. It would keep my words. My breath. My silence. The empty house would not be empty again.